Well, Nikki, let's get started
Yes.
and we can just go ahead and we'll have a little chat with you guys, and that's probably the best that we can do because
What happened to Dell?
I think he was just stopped to get something. But Nikki and I are, for those of you who don't know, a mother-daughter duo here. So you get two of us for the price of one today. And we thought we would come and talk about some of our trials and tribulations as we went ahead with navigating the special ed system and the IEP system when Nikki was in school. And for those of you who don't know,
I wasn't supposed to be educated. My mom was my guidance counselor at the elementary school, but was not allowed to admit me as a student. I probably should back up. When I started preschool, I was kicked out before I started because I couldn't walk right. So the preschool teacher called my parents, and I actually recall this clearly, even though I was 3, and stated that I wasn't ready for school because she seen me walk with the other kids. And because I can't walk right, it's clear I'm not ready for school. Were the exact words.
so we started really early trying to find out the best ways that we could advocate because we knew that things were not going to be right. And I worked in the public schools for 30 years. I was a counselor for 30 years. And then after I retired, I had the opportunity to go to work for Wisconsin Facets, which is our parent education and training center in the state of Wisconsin. Each of the states is mandated by special ed to be able to have a parent training and information center in the state. So for 13 years after I retired, I had the opportunity to work for them and was their training coordinator. So some of the materials that I'm giving you today, I know very well because I worked with them and had an opportunity of being able to even help publish some of them. So one of the things that we'll be talking about today is the IEP checklist, which I had the opportunity to author the committee that put it together. But one of the things that we wanted to do today is to share with you our experiences as we move through the system, but also to give you resources that we think a lot of people don't spend time looking at and being able to utilize because I think it really, really helps people. So Nikki has a lot that she wants to share. I wanted to get through some of the resource information first, but I think we need to probably set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. So Nikki, if you want to,
We are going to go to.
if you want to talk about your experiences when you first went into school, and then we can talk about some of those.
Going back to the whole preschool thing. I remember because I used to walk past with the babysitter every day. We'd walk the other kids to preschool, and suddenly we stopped walking that way. And I asked why, and it wasn't answered. And finally, they said they don't want you to go there. And I could figure it out. I'm maybe 3, but I could figure it out. And I'm like, but I can read. I did not understand the disconnect between if I can't walk normal, that doesn't mean I can't learn. That didn't understand it.
And I think one of the things that I'd like to move back to and discuss a little bit is that when Nikki was first born, the first few years of her life were impacted by all the surgeries that she had. She had about 5 surgeries when she was less than 3 years old. She had bowel obstruction, many different surgeries. And so we knew that something wasn't really right as far as normal development kinds of things. And then when Nikki was using her bottle, she couldn't lift the bottle up the correct way. And so
anything with a motoric component that had motoric steps, I couldn't figure out.
So we learned right away that we had to do adaptive things to make things work. So we got adaptive straws that went into bottles. And remember, this was 1978. So that's a long time ago. And a lot of the adaptive equipment
Wasn't there.
didn't exist at that time. So we either help people develop them, or we try to find things that would work for us. So I think as we
Know
moved ahead.
also why you don't ban straws. If we, nowadays, you may see environmentally, we are all banning all straws. The disabled don't just use straws for eating and drinking, we use it to be able to, speaking, we use it to be able to swallow, we use it for suction. So I understand wanting to save the planet, but I would rather focus on Exxon and not the person who's trying to feed their child. And
So-
people didn't always understand.
So, moving along the developmental milestones, Nikki didn't reach those milestones like other people did. So one of the things that we decided to do, my husband and I, is to educate ourselves as best as we can. So I've worked for 30 years in the public schools, and I had the opportunity of knowing a little bit more than just a regular parent, because that was some of my training. And I kept saying, something's not right, we need to check this out. So we established a relationship with a neurologist, and we went to the Wasteman Center
At
here.
3.5, the Wasteman Center diagnosed me with cerebral palsy, the Asperger's syndrome, though it didn't have that name yet, and ADHD. I call it the nice trifecta.
And so basically at that time, when they did some of this developmental stuff for us, we knew there were different components. And in fact, the Wasteman Center didn't say, quote, cerebral palsy, they said to us,
Severe developmental apraxia.
So we had to figure out what all this was. And we had a wonderful neurologist, his name is Dr. Edelman, and he's from Madison, and I think he just retired.
He just recently retired.
Yeah.
It was absolutely
He was a
wonderful.
real partner for us in our journey, a very big partner in our journey, because
You don't want a neurologist who just tells you what you want to hear. You want one that's going to challenge but also be honest.
and he was, because he knew what I did for a living, and he knew that I had some information. And so one day he said to me, and we followed, and he gave us ideas about things. Nikki was in physical therapy, she was in occupational therapy, she was in speech therapy.
Equine therapy.
And we did all of those things, and we were fortunate because we were able to get her to do those things. Some families are not quite as fortunate, but we knew how to navigate some of those things and learn how to teach others how to do those same kinds of things as well. So after our visit with the people at the Wasteman Center and some of the diagnosis that they gave us, the neurologist said to me, as Nikki started elementary school, and Nikki was in the elementary school that I was a counselor in, and so...
You might want to back up a bit. Because in order to do that, you still had to get me into school.
Well, yes, this is an interesting situation. In Whitewater, where we lived at the time, Whitewater contracted with the county board, and they had a school for special education kids. And so all their
Called Lakeland.
all their special education kids went to that school.
And and the public school got money for every one of those kids that was sent there.
So basically, I knew that Nikki was twice exceptional from the developmental stages that I could see. And I said, no, Nikki is going to be educated in public education. I'm a big public education person. I feel very strongly about public education. And so we felt that that was the case. And we had to kind of fight to make sure that that was the case. And
She
through
sued
the
her
course-
boss when I was 6.
And so basically that's what I did. I went to the county board and told them our child was not going to that school, she was going to the public school, and that I didn't care what was happening, but that I felt that they needed to make sure that she was provided the education that she deserved. So I served notice to the people that I worked with and the
And
people
got
at
me a lawyer.
Lakeland School, and I said to them, Nikki needs to be educated in the public educational situation. And so basically, I wrote a DPI complaint when she was that young,
And then
that
Jeff
many years ago.
Spitzer-Resnick helped out with your complaint. I'm sorry, I like the story, so I want to just...
And that's Nikki. And so, yes, in fact, I wrote this complaint and I sent it off to Jeff Spitzer-Resnick, who at that time worked at Disability Rights Wisconsin. And I said to him, can you look at this? And he said to me, well, Bonnie, I can't take your case, but I'll look at it and I'll make some suggestions for you. And so he looked at it and he said, I think you've got the bases covered, so send it in. So not only did the district itself had to do a corrective action plan, but they had to provide educational types of experiences for Nikki.
A free appropriate public education is set out by USB Raleigh, which they were not providing.
So basically that's the foundational kinds of things that we went through. And we were really lucky because of the fact that I knew this much. But part of my reason for working in advocacy and continuing my work at Wisconsin Facets after I retired from the public education and from public school work is that I felt that anything that I learned, I wanted to share with other people, because I felt really, really strongly about how people struggled all the time. And if in fact I had to struggle so much and my husband had to struggle so much and we knew a little bit more than others, we felt really strongly about the fact that we needed to tell everybody what they can do. So that's part of the reason why I have the information for you today. And I think that Nikki wants to tell some other parts of the story, but I'm going to spend a minute or two going through some
You
of the
need to tell
resources.
the resources.
Yes.
Otherwise, I end up on a tangent.
Yeah.
She knows me a little too well.
So basically, we're hoping that you'll get some of the information from today and take some of it with you to know that you can do whatever you need to do, and you're a strong enough person to be able to advocate for your families.
And people don't often give parents enough credit on this. They just tell them that, oh, you have to hire someone, otherwise you won't be able to handle it. It's not necessarily the case.
So basically what we did here is we just put together a real scant outline for us to talk about some things and what our intent is today. And I believe really strongly that education is knowledge, and knowledge is power. So the more you know, the more you're able to advocate and move forward and get the things that your family or your kids or your students really need. So basically, that's what we wanted to talk about today. And let me just go on.
And the first document you need to focus on is the IEP and getting qualified for an IEP. Now, you're going to hear a lot of people who are going to say, you are labeling my child. I hate to tell you, but when it comes to public education, label equals funding. And plain and simple, in order to get the needs that are met, you are not labeling your child as much as you are providing the services that are necessary. Now, do I like that? Not necessarily. Do I want to pigeonhole? Absolutely not. I'm also dealing with budgets in which the federal government has never paid the 40% coverage of special education that they promised in 1973. They said that when the Individuals with Disability Education Act was passed in 73, they stated that the states would pay 60% of the cost and the feds would pay 40%. Feds have never paid more than 17%, now pay between 7 and 11%. It would save about $1 billion a year. It's been calculated under the Save the Promise workshop if that would have been fulfilled in the state of Wisconsin. It has never happened.
And part of what we wanted to do today is to give people tools that they can walk out of here and make suggestions to others. If it's your family, if it's your classroom, if you're an advocate and working with others, there are some things that you can do. My little map that I have there is just a schema to show you, the roadmap of what the IEP means. Yes.
Will this all map over onto 504 plans as well, please?
Yes, and basically we can talk about the difference between those two because I think that's important. And to direct your question, I'll do that right away. So IDEA, which tells you that you can qualify for an individual education program, is mandated by the Department of Education, and it is what we call an entitlement grant. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 tells us that any institution, whether it be a school, a business, etc., that receives any kind of federal funding must provide adaptations and accommodations to individuals who have disabilities, whereas the 504 plan comes in. The IDEA portion, or the IEP, is the Department of Education monitors and polices that. Section 504 is policed by the Department of Civil Rights. So you can sue under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. You cannot necessarily do the same kind of thing and have monetary rewards as you could with 504 than you would with IDEA.
Except under the US v. Perez, which just came down about a year ago, that says if the relief that you are requesting is not something the IEP can provide. In this case, it was deaf education, and it was being included in certain, was field trips, etc. It could not be answered solely by the IEP. Then you can take it to the regular courts.
In the Department of Education and the Individuals with Disability Act, when we talk about specifically with IDEA as it relates to developing an IEP, we're going to talk about how to do that. But in Section 504, any of the things that we're going to talk about today can translate to 504, very much so, because a 504 requirement is to develop an accommodation education plan. It's not necessarily called an IEP, but it's called an AEP. And you can call it whatever you want, but basically what you're doing in Section 504 is putting together a list of those accommodations that would be necessary for your individual who has disabilities to be able to function in the area in which that person is. So basically, it's the same kind of thing. So what we tell people is that you can have an IEP, but you can also have a 504 plan. They don't want to tell you that.
You can have both.
You can have both, because 504 is more overarching and can go outside of schools as well as be in schools. So basically what I would say is that if the school district is telling you at this point in time that your son or daughter does not qualify for an IEP, what I would do is to request a Section 504 plan. For many years, the state of Wisconsin was not able to suggest 504 plans because a lot of people were saying to them at this point in time, we don't write 504 plans. Well, not only are you supposed to write 504 plans, but you're mandated by the law to do so if you find that the person in that program has a disability and that particular program accepts federal funding.
Any federal funding, even a dime, it is included, and it is one of the major life areas, correct?
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
And so for the 504, I'm sorry, I don't.
No, please.
Wait, that's what we wanted this
We
to be.
wanted this
We wanted
to be like this.
Because your questions are more valuable than us standing up here and telling you about all these kinds of things. What I basically did is put it together so you'd have resources and you could share those resources with others.
Yeah. So like the 504 plan, you mentioned, or I heard that it kind of like, it's more broader.
Yep.
You know, outside of school systems, so like bus transportation, et cetera.
Yep.
IEPs don't go that broadly?
IEPs only is primarily K through 12, and in certain other circumstances, IEPs do not necessarily cover the buses at all. Additionally, in college education, IEP and IDEA does not work.
So,
But a 504 would.
So,
Yes.
504 would work, but also remember at that time that when you have the entitlement program of the Individuals with Disability Education Act, that goes K-12. When you leave K-12, you're not, quote, entitled. You have to self-disclose if you have a disability moving on in education. So for example, I worked at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater in their Center for Students with Disabilities. When students came to us, we had to have proof of disability for us to be able to write a plan for them to be able to be accommodated. You would consider it to be a 504 plan. Each college or institution of higher education calls it whatever they want.
UWS called it a visa.
And we called it a visa as well when people came to us. And we would write a plan that would provide the accommodations that were necessary at the higher education level for people. For example, a note taker.
I have a funny story on that.
A note taker, an individual who would be able to go to a private room to take their tests, an individual who would be provided with notes from the teacher if in fact a note taker wasn't available, accommodation seating, so all of those kinds of things would go in the mix, extended time and deadlines on different things, breaking certain assignments up into smaller parts, all of those kinds of things.
And these things are essential. For example, if you have a college advisor, hypothetically of course, who convinces you to take 3 power lectures on Tuesday, for example, when you are a severe attention deficit as one part of your trifecta, and say your mother just takes one look at your schedule and says this counselor has no idea that you cannot sit still for more than 40 minutes at a time.
How about 30 seconds?
30 seconds. And rewrote my entire schedule.
And basically, it's really frustrating to me after working in the public schools and working in higher education when people take students with disabilities and try to provide services for them when they don't know what the services are, number one, and number two, what those particular people's needs are. So I think you have to start with the needs all the time. You must start with the needs. And then in moving forward, you build your program around what those needs are. Now, in Nikki's case, she was twice exceptional. People at that time, in 1980s, they didn't have any idea what twice exceptionality is, or now dual exceptionality, or whatever you want to call it.
I just got to put in a policy in 2024 in advanced learning. It's the first time we've ever put it in.
Yeah, and people would not recognize the fact that you can be disabled and you can be bright, which is amazing. We have lots of those stories to tell you. Like, for example, when Nikki went to the middle school, people didn't want to give her much credit for anything. Nikki was different, she didn't have many friends, and it was really hard.
I had one friend, I screwed that up.
Yeah, she did, and we'll talk about that also. But when she went to the
There's a
middle
reason.
school, her school was about 2 blocks away from where I was working and where the elementary school was. And so after she left that building, I would go to the building and bring information every day about educating the entire staff, educating
They didn't want
the
to.
people, because I felt that the people that were going to work with Nikki ought to know what her disabilities are. And that goes the same, like some of you who may work in school or have talked to people in school, some of the special education teachers don't want to share the information with the regular education teachers. Well, how are you going to provide the services in a regular education class with a special ed kid when you don't know what their needs are? You have to know needs. You must always start with needs, and I think that's important.
Here's this. The middle school was not planning on accommodating. I'm going to show a picture, I'm passing it around, and there's a reason I'm showing it, because I know it's going to seem completely weird. Bear with me 1 second while I get it.
Well, while she's getting it, and we can talk more about 504 plans, and if you're interested, what we could do is you could take our information and I can provide you more information on 504 plans. But what Nikki is showing you now is
Here's a set of stairs that they wanted. This was in the gym locker. 1, it's not accessible. 2, I had 3 students try to throw me down it to see if retards could bounce.
and so
That's when they decided that after we threatened suit is when they had got a restraining order for my own protection. That's when they decided that they better follow the law.
And that's one
I
thing
don't
that-
want it to get that bad ever again to anyone else.
And I think that's part of the reason why Nikki is on the school board and why she does the things that she does. But I need to tell you from a parent perspective, because that was a real hard and hurtful time for us. And I went to the principal and I said to him, with my husband, who was a great partner in our road to getting.
Yeah, it's about 6'4" college basketball.
And I said, you know, we're not going to send Nikki back to school until you can guarantee her safety. And we are convinced that right now she's not safe in this institution. And I have spent my whole life advocating for kids and making sure that kids in the elementary school are safe. And when I send my own child to the middle school and she's beaten up, she's thrown down a staircase, she's thrown into a stairwell, that to me is not right. So what I did is I went to the police liaison officer at that time and I said, we're taking out a restraining order because I am not going to have those kids bully my kid. And not because she's just my kid, but because that shouldn't happen in schools. And then we served notice and we said, we are not sending Nikki back to this middle school until you guarantee her safety.
2 days later.
No, let me finish, okay? So 3 days later, basically what happened was that the principal called, and we knew him because this was a small community where Nikki went to school, and we knew him, and we said, can you guarantee her safety? And in fact, my husband answered the phone, and he said, Jake, can you guarantee Nikki's safety? And he said, well, we think so. We think so, he said. And my husband said to him, she's not coming back to school until you can definitively tell me that you are sure that she will be safe. And we did not send her back, and then we got a call again in about 2 more days, and he said, we were able to secure things, we have a hallway
She will not be touched.
She will not be hurt, you can send her back to school, and we did. And so it wasn't the easiest transition, but at the same time, Nikki was able to establish herself, and she was able to at least get an education there. The other issue that happened during that period of time, which was really frustrating for us as well, is that because IDEA was just starting and because IEPs were not necessarily as developed as they were.
The ADA only passed in 1990. I didn't get my rights till 12.
So one of the things and one of the accommodations that was necessary for Nikki is that she doesn't write, that all her fine motor skills are impaired in her hands. So she doesn't write. So she spent 17 years in occupational therapy learning how to sign her name so she could do a check, learning how to be able to line up things so she could do math, doing all of those kinds of things that were very difficult for her. So those are the kinds of things that I feel very strongly.
Schools can make those accommodations.
We chose, and this is important because we chose having occupational and physical therapy outside of school. Occupational and physical therapy are what we call secondary services or related services in the IEP. So if a child qualifies for them, they can receive those services, but they're not, quote, the primary service. One of the things that I wanted to make sure of is that she would get all of those services that she needed. So we used occupational and physical therapy as a consult at school, and we took her to hospital-based therapy because we felt very strongly that the hospital knew the needs that she had, and her hospital-based therapy and therapists would communicate with the school therapists so that we were sure that those things worked together. And I think that's something that you need to keep in mind, and if you're working with
Also, it
families, you
doesn't
need to
deal
tell them.
with pulling out. You don't miss the same amount of instruction as if you would be pulled out for service.
Yeah, so, you know, basically we try to, the best that we could, to establish those times that she went to the hospital for her therapy as much after school or before school or whenever we could get him, so she missed as little as she could from regular instruction in school. But to just do some of the resources, and then we can go back to some of the stories, because I know that Nikki wants to do some of those.
No, you need to go back.
One of the publications that I think that's really a great one if you're working with individuals, and even if it's a 504 thing, is what we call the IEP checklist. And this is a checklist that was developed by Wisconsin Facets, and I think is a real important one for you to take a look at. It has all the information about before the IEP meeting, what you need to do, how you need to plan, what is important, how you can prepare, and then during the IEP meeting, for example, how you can participate. What are the things that you need to do to participate? And it's a checklist. You don't have to write any of it. It's just a checklist. Have I done this? Have I done this? Have I done this? Remind yourself to do this. Remind yourself to do this. And those are some of the things. And then after the meeting, what are some of the things that you can do? So I think this is a real valuable little pamphlet that you could take with you. I think another one that I believe is really, really important, and if you haven't grabbed one of these or if you don't have one of these, this is called Special Ed in Plain Language. And Special Ed in Plain Language is written for the layperson. It has all kinds of information. It's a collaborative effort between Wisconsin Facets, between the Department of Public Instruction, between Disability Rights Wisconsin, that all got together and said, the people that we advocate for, the families that we advocate for, don't have the knowledge that they need to be able to move forward and to provide the things that their children need. So basically, what this is, and what I love it, is it talks about what the topic is, what the law says, what the law actually means, what needs to be done, and what parents need to know. So it divides to those 4 sections, each one of those important areas of what the law is talking about. So my suggestion is that any person that has a child that's either suspected of having a disability or is enrolled in the special education process should really have one of these as their guide, because it's important for them to have this information to move forward. And of course, you know, calling
There is another resource as well, rightslaw.com, WRIGHTSLAW.com. If you want to file complaints, examples, letters, etc. on filing complaints, that one I use as well.
Yeah, and then let me just also suggest to you that that little pamphlet on Special Ed in Plain Language also has a 2019 supplement, and the supplement can be found online. Special Ed in Plain Language is online. You can hook up to that.